Just doing my thing.
It always does that when I try to open my timer. Do you want to start over? Does that bother you?
Doesn't to me. Imperfections are perfection.
Well, then we're on the clock.
All right, then.
Get to it.
Thanks for joining us on the Voice of C38 podcast. As you can tell, Matt's joining me.
Did you know that a looner is somebody with a balloon fetish?
Not a bird.
Balloon fetish. You know, like those weird pervert videos where women sit on balloons?
I
That
do not
fetish
know those videos.
is known as a looner, if you're into that. Just Minnesota got me thinking.
Oh, man, that's awesome. That voice you heard there is from Mile High Sports, Marco Cummings.
Hola.
So what kind of porn do you know about?
0.
Hey, this isn't a soccer podcast today.
That level of repression makes me uncomfortable being in this room with you.
Maybe I'm secretly into women who sit on balloons. Looners.
So you're a looner. There you go.
It's a new fetish. It's just now been born. Yeah, and then, following all of that up, the drunken monk.
Greetings.
You'd think he'd be on a time delay.
He is on a time delay, isn't he?
You'd think.
Or is he just that slow? Drinking.
Depends on what's in that cup.
Drinking. He's just drinking
In
to
that
stall
cup
time,
is,
that's all.
Leopold's whiskey right now.
All right. Well, at least we're drinking some whiskey tonight.
On to the festivities.
Yeah. Onto
You
the
guys should get money for that plug.
that plug. Do you know how many shameless plugs we have given multiple different breweries, distilleries?
Free stuff.
We've given lots of plugs. They're all free. That's just how we roll around here. But to reflect on the Minnesota game, I felt like whiskey was needed. I didn't really.
A bottle of it.
If I consumed a bottle of it and then went on mic, I would be regretting everything I said afterwards. Although I would probably be speaking a lot of truth, I still would regret it. I just, from the fan perspective, I was a bit frustrated with the whole display.
Well, let me just start with this. That was not the same lineup that played the previous two games.
Oh, from Minnesota?
Minnesota, yes.
Yeah.
We didn't play that team that played Portland or
No, but
Atlanta
you
necessarily.
if a few minor changes in a lineup takes a team from letting in 11 goals in 2 matches to barely letting in 2 and staying in a fight with a supposedly good power ranked team, I find that hard to believe that their roster had just minimal alterations because, look at our team, and when we put in a different roster, what
As they
can
say,
happen?
further testing is necessary. We'll see what happens with New England
Week
at least.
Right. I was a little concerned when Bobby Shuttleworth came in because as a fan and as someone who's seen our team go up against this guy, we've never fared very well against Bobby Shuttleworth. So I was kind of thrown back at the fact that he wasn't even their starting keeper to begin with, and that they were starting an older dude from Sweden or something like that on loan. So, yeah, maybe he wasn't as good as he was supposed to be, and they were trying to give him a crack, and the injury happened the way it happened. And, after having the kind of catastrophic losses that they had, you have to make changes to your lineup. I would hope that the Rapids don't get to a point where we say the same thing, but I feel like some changes needed to be made earlier in the game. I felt like Nana needed to come in way sooner.
From the minute 0?
Well, maybe not
I don't
minute
get what the
0.
holdup. I don't get what the holdup is.
But
He's here for a reason.
Right, and maybe he's not fully acclimated, because if you look at some of his comments...
Such a company line.
Right, it is. It's turning into a cliche thing for a Colorado team, especially when it comes to soccer, because you're doing a lot more
Who knew athletes were so goddamn fragile?
cardio than maybe, say, throw ball or something like that.
It's an MLS cliche line, too.
Right, it is, because every team uses it as a crutch when they come here. Well, they'll either use it as a crutch or to their advantage, depending on their result, but over the last year, they've used it as a bit of a crutch. And I don't know. He did make some comments in the post game about maybe not fully getting there yet, but he's getting used to it. Either way, what Matt and I were talking about during the game, we were watching Sam Cronin and Michael Azera and felt like they're two like players when it comes to their role in this squad. And what it's doing is they're both naturally so defensive minded that they're not creating the offensive opportunities to give the front four guys those opportunities that they need. And that's where the lack of scoring is coming from. If you look at the movement that Nana made in the first 5 minutes, Sam had moved like that in 30 minutes or maybe even the whole game. And it's just kind of the way the player plays naturally, trying to get in further up the field. Maybe in certain situations he's not supposed to be, but he's trying to make something happen. Even though Pablo has his tactics, when players get out on the pitch and things happen, they just naturally do what they naturally do, despite certain tactics and what they're told. And I feel like they were they're holding the team back. And maybe a guy like Nana is supposed to be that, missing ingredient, and why we haven't seen much of him till now. I mean, they're going to rely on that altitude excuse for a little while, but at some point it's going to run out if we're not using him.
Yeah, not for me.
Well, going off of that, I don't think it was Cronin's best game. I don't think he was the worst player on the pitch. Like
Marco, can you move your mic so you're talking to the side of it, not the tip of it? Because just
like this.
Like see how Brendan's is, either up or down.
Yeah. Like this.
Yes, that's much better.
There we go.
Thank you.
Can you hear me better now?
Well, you don't have to be right up in it, but.
Well, I also know I'm
Beautiful.
Mr. Mumbly.
No, but you sound.
Mumblerson.
I can see the waveform, and you were not registering at all before, but now you're good.
Well, what I was gonna say is, it wasn't Cronin's best performance. I don't think he was the worst player on the pitch. Like, I've read some online comments that have said so, but that's breaking my first rule of never read the online comments. But I totally agree with what Brendan was saying. Who would be your, I guess you would say, anti-man of the match? For me, it would be Mikael Williams.
Yeah.
I'd have to, I mean, sometimes, the arguments are kind of what keep people into it, but Williams really did have a bad game, and it made you miss Eric Miller.
And the reason I say that is the two key moments in that game, the penalty and the almost own goal.
Yeah. Ooh.
So just those two alone will earn you anti-man of the match, in my opinion.
Is that something we should maybe start, the anti-MOM hashtag?
I think so. I think that would be a good thing to start.
Fleming called the numpty of the week. Is that
the numpties,
he already does that.
If you find the right
nickname.
But the anti-man of the match may not be so bad either, because I mean, not that man ever wants to be named anti-man of the match, but hey, maybe it'll help you step your game up.
Yeah, numpty of the week. Where did that go?
It doesn't do it anymore, does it?
What happened, Mr. Fleming?
Maybe we should bring that back.
I think he only does it at the behest of Conor McGahey.
All right, we'll bring it back either way. That or we will, which, who knows, they might leave that kind of stuff to us anyway.
Yeah, well, he usually didn't pick a rapid as numpty of the week.
Yeah, well, that's where, we relied on Tammy's flopper of the week, the Kaiser Sose of the week, or however you want to kind of put it. But there was definitely, we should almost make sure we keep that up, because there were some floppers that definitely were around this week. Some people thought that Marley kind of sold that card, but not at all. I don't think so.
Well, you can't fake unless he had a packet of fake blood in his sock. You can't fake that, so there's contact there.
That's taken
and
it
from
to
our
baseball
angle
level.
in the press box, we couldn't see the blood, but on the TV you could. And I was right in front of the Minnesota technical staff, and they weren't happy with that call. But the GIF that was like seconds after on Twitter showed that there is contact, and I showed it to the guy that was yelling at me. I don't know why he picked me to start yelling at for the card, but I was like, hey bud, there's contact right there, and his cleats up. It's a definite red card.
Well, it took two of the Minnesota coaches to drag that guy off of the field. Whatever his name was, the one who did it. Warner? No.
I don't. In one ear and out the other.
Justin Davis, I think.
We'll see him again in a month.
I was watching him, and
he looked like number 2 out there.
Yeah, he wasn't happy. It took two of their coaches to nudge him off the pitch.
And the other aspect of that red card is they're not going to take off Harrison, who was their top goal-scoring threat when the game is tied, for no reason. Like, he was their only chance to pull back 3 points, in my opinion. When he went off, I was like, okay, this is going to be the result, even though there was 20 minutes left and they're up a man. After Harrison was off, I'm like, this is done.
It's sad. Being up a man should have counterbalanced that, shouldn't it?
I kind of was in the same boat. I was almost even a little afraid of us just completely losing control of the game in general, and even maybe losing the game. It just almost had that scary feel to it where we can end up on the upside down side of things, where, you know, it just completely turned into one big cluster and we came out on the losing end, where, you know, maybe it was another almost own goal or a free kick that shouldn't have happened too close to the box, or a handball in the box. You know, all it takes is a bad bounce. And that's where I'm starting to really feel like I need to push the fact that the only time that you can have the mentality of a win is a win is after a really gritty game and you won 1-0 or 2-1. That's the time to have that mentality. You can't go into a game having that mentality. You can't go into the second half having that mentality, because the game isn't over yet. It's not certain that you're going to finish that game out. No matter how confident you are, all it takes is just one bad bounce, one bad play, one bad decision, one mistake. No one's perfect.
One bullshit PK.
And with these refs, you can't rely on anything.
That PK was an absolute, like, I watched the replay over and over again, and I was like, he didn't even make contact. The guy literally just fell over into.
Yeah, it looked like Williams was in front.
I definitely thought it was a soft PK.
It was
Williams' body positioning wasn't.
No, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
he left it up to the ref, which you shouldn't do.
They had tangled legs like a pretzel. I mean, it could have gone either way against either guy, but because it was in the box, because of the way he sold it, and Mikhail was not in the right position to let that happen, or for that to happen in the first place. So if you're going to fault somebody, you can still fault Mikhail for it.
But he got called up to Trinidad and Tobago.
We do have some questions from the chat. Who do you think the best player of the match was? And what did we think of Gashi for Powers? Having Gashi in the 10 role.
Well, I feel like that both Gashi and Doyle weren't on their A game. I felt like there was times that they didn't get to balls that you would think that they would normally get to balls, or you've seen them get to balls before, or make certain passes, or their touch might have been a little bit different. Gashi moved differently than Powers, but in all honesty, Powers can draw some more fouls and stop the play a little further up the field than Gashi might, but it's a whole different kind of style of play between the two. I don't know if I can say I like one over the other after one game, because I just don't feel like Gashi had his best game, and he obviously wasn't 100%. As for who I feel like the best player was, I'm going to give my vote to number 21. I feel like Nana had a really good 10 minutes, and man, if we can see more of him, then we might be seeing some more goals. So he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on.
This probably comes as no surprise for me, but I'm going to say Hairston. Everything they create offensively, I think, is either created by Hairston or goes through Hairston. Baji had that goal, but Hairston helps kind of keep that back line honest with the threat of his pace. Mm-hmm. And Baji, even when he's scored 2 goals in the first 3 games, but there's large stretches of games where he just kind of disappears.
Yeah, kind of depending on how the defense marks him and plays him, and I think maybe it helps to have Doyle in there, because then they're keeping an eye on all 3 of them. I feel like Doyle's getting a lot less attention, because there was a lot of the time that we all were feeling like he was very open but never got the ball, whether that's just, you know, guys not picking up their head or not wanting to pass to him, or who knows?
But yelling loud enough.
There was definitely a handful of times where, you know, I remember pointing, going, Doyle! But it never, you know, it seemed like we were forcing it to Mark Birch, and we were really trying to, you know, push our offense outside. And, you know, obviously Doyle likes the ball off of his head. Every time he gets the ball, he's looking to dump it to whoever's coming out on the wing, moving outside, so that way he can get himself ideally in the box, but he hasn't been in the box as much as one might like, because, with that dude's heading ability, he needs to be in the box. So
well, and that's what's kind of flooring to me is that we're playing we're trying to cross and head the ball in with not exactly the tallest strikers or best headers in the league. And we're continuing, like, Baji didn't do bad. We had a couple headers that went really close to those posts that could have really gotten a good
Alan Gordon had one that could have.
Yeah, but the delivery wasn't there. That's what frustrated me. Once Gordon went on, I'm like, okay, it's Alan Gordon time. But every time they had a chance to get him, it was just off. It was frustrating. And Gashi was already out of the game at that point, and I feel like he's the only guy that can deliver.
I wouldn't say the only guy. Cerna can too, but I feel like Cerna was working extra hard and maybe in his own way to try to recompensate what had been lost as far as the scoreline, the momentum, and everything else. Because you could tell the way that certain guys were hustling, that they were taking it upon themselves individually, that they didn't like the situation. But it didn't matter when only 2 or 3 guys individually are stepping up and everyone else is kind of checking out. And that's kind of how it seemed for me in that last, in the dying minutes of the game. Here we are, up a man, and Minnesota's got the ball in our half. Shouldn't be that way. And you can see it in some of the body language in the guys. Like, they were already defeated. Did not expect the scoreline to be that way in the 85th minute. And, just doing everything they could to hold on to the tie.
We need to put the game away. That's like, when you're up a man, I don't care who's on the field. Even if we're playing a bunch of defensive midfielders, which what we did all last season, you should be able to score a goal on a team that's allowed 11 goals in their first 2 games in 20 minutes when you're a man up. Even if they sit in the back of the box, like, you just should be able to score goals.
Well, I didn't see them fighting for the tie. I saw them really aggressively trying to get that last goal in. It just never happened.
We definitely started throwing the ball at the net more, but we can't have more of these games where it's too little too late. And, I've been harping about the killer instinct now for 2 weeks. Hopefully in the next 3 weeks they find it.
And they should have had that mentality coming out of halftime. Because they were up 1-0, but it wasn't a good first half in my opinion. They should have come out the gate and got that second goal, and I feel like the game would have been over if that would happen.
It was a bad first 15, 20 minutes.
Right. And
it didn't start off looking good at all.
I feel the same way, and it was just wasn't good, and we didn't come out firing, and it was. There's been concerns I've had at going into halftime when we've had the lead for, I don't know, since Pablo's been coach. And I've been saying it for a while that depending on what he says at halftime makes or breaks the game. And he can't go in there and say, all right, guys, we've got this. Go out there and defend the lead. That should never, ever be said. I said that a year ago, and it's being said. You can tell when the guys come out and the style of soccer they play. It's still being said. And as long as it's still being said, we're going to still have these conversations at the end of the day because it's not going to change things. We can change players all we want, but it comes down to the mentality. You force these guys to sit on their heels when they're up. That's making them do everything they don't want to do. They want to go out there and just play soccer, score goals, win. No one really wants to sit back on their heels for 45 minutes and try and hold on to a 1-0 win.
Well, I do, but that's why I'm not out there. I'd actually like to pull up a chair and sit on a chair.
Well, some defensive-minded guys are okay with that, because then that means they're working harder, but then that takes away some of the mentality of half of the other guys on the field. I mean, it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to put teams away and you're trying to set an example and you're trying to set pace, I don't think that mentality is healthy.
No, and certainly you're exhausting your defensive line too when you keep one touching it. There was no more than 2 touches per pass, and it was just control, get rid of it, control, get rid of it. And it was both teams doing that, but nobody tried to actually control the ball, take their time, look around, It just looked like a bunch of
ass and elbows ball.
Yeah, looked like a bunch of kids out there.
And that's one thing Pablo stressed to us in the preseason is he doesn't want to see that. He wants them to take a moment, look around, and not always pass it back.
I haven't been to a whole lot of training, but the few I have been, that's what they're doing. They're calling names and punting it out. They're working on that delivery, but that's a drill. They're taking that into the full 90 minutes now.
But kind of going off of that, Pablo was pretty livid on the sideline, so maybe that's part of the reason why.
Yeah. Yeah, that picture John Babiak took was great. Titled Frustration, just as he was walking off. That just said it all.
We needed to see it because despite some of his post-game comments, you know, blow smoke up people's asses all you want. Some people are going to see right through it. But, like, I've been harping about the fact that, you know, I read body language, I read facial expressions, I read behavior. And if I had saw a melancholy Pablo after that, I would have really have been raising some serious flags of concerns. But I saw a frustrated Pablo after that. And if anything that I could take away positively, it was that. Despite what he said in his comments afterwards and whatnot, you could see it on his face. Dude clearly wasn't happy. And I needed to see that because I wasn't. There's no way as a fan that I could be happy if that result, based on Minnesota's first two results, different lineup or not, I expected something more out of us. And to hear that the players expected more out of it, to see it on Pablo's face, all right, I can kind of be okay with 1 point. Kind of okay, but...
Hey, they did give you multiple goals.
But we didn't win by multiple goals. That's another big thing. But it's not like we started off last season winning every game. I mean, we only had 4 points out of our first 3 games, which is pretty much where we're at now. So it's not really worth, you know, getting...
The sky isn't
But didn't we start off last season with 2 away games?
You know, but yeah, okay. So we start at home a little bit more. We've got, you know, a pretty front-loaded schedule as far as home games go, and you know, we can kind of twist it however we want to make it more important than last year or to change it, but it's still early. So
plus, that's one positive of this 3-week break is I feel like this team ebbs and flows. So they could very easily go on a bad streak after a game like this, but they kind of have those 3 weeks to reset and go to Sporting Kansas City where they've had a lot of success under Pablo. So maybe that'll be the game that kind of turns things back in the right direction.
And nothing like going...
I've watched the Rapids for 20 years, and they've always been terrible after bye weeks. It's never really been their strong suit to come out strong after a bye week.
Well, there's really, I mean, it's hard to sit there and say after 20 years that there's still some sort of similarity that makes this team suck after a bye week. It doesn't help that the guys got 4 days off right away. But, you know.
Hey, last international break last year, we didn't come out strong after the international break.
No, the one in June? Yeah.
Yep.
That was...
No, I think after we drew 4th of July, we had a little bit of a losing or not winning streak anyway.
Yeah.
But they also had a ton of injuries at that point as well.
Yeah.
Which, you know, sometimes that can happen when you don't go for a while without playing and then you jump right back into it. And like there's a clear difference between playing a league game every week or sometimes twice a week to being off 3 weeks and then jumping into a game. Despite how much you train, injuries still are more probable. It's a different kind of pace.
Yeah. It gives us time to get Huber back before we lose any more points. But if there's a bright side, you know, MLS is saying this was the it was the Minnesota team everybody assumed was a corpse, which makes them Lazarus, which makes us Jesus. So, hey, Rapids are Jesus.
We got Jesus on the roster. He wears number 11. Just saying.
So that's one bright side. But another, you know, useless marketing point, but I'm going to call this the Sriracha game. Just like last year, Orlando, it hurt not getting those points, but like eating too much sriracha, it's gonna hurt later on too.
Yeah.
When we drew Orlando, and then we lost the Supporter Shield by 2 points, by 1 win, a game we should have won by all rights. I just worry this game is going to come back as spicy diarrhea later on in the year.
There were a lot of sriracha games. Vancouver was my sriracha game.
Yeah, see.
DC could have been a sriracha game too, but this was at home.
Yeah, or
Orlando was at home,
or a Chipotle. Either way, you could it's a bad mess coming out later, and you're probably very right that 4 months from now we're going to be looking back at the Minnesota game, saying that's where we should have killed them, or at least gotten 3 points instead of lost 2. That could be very, very accurate, which. That's the problem with these games is, you got to take everyone seriously, even when it's this early in the season and you still don't have all the pieces together.
I didn't want to have the sriracha game this early in the season. That's for sure. But I knew it when I saw it. I was watching that game thinking, holy shit, this is it. This is that one. Yeah. Unless we go tailspin for the rest of the season, or a good part of it anyway.
I mean, yeah, I guess that's a good thing.
It could be Houston's year, for all I know.
Well.
Could be Portland's year.
Or again. Chicago.
No.
Speaking of stocking up, transfer window wish list. I think we need a pacey number 10. I don't think Gashi is the answer at number 10. I don't think Doyle is. I think we need South American number 10, like a Nico Ladero.
Or something like Atlanta's got going on.
I feel like they've had the idea with Marco Papa and Juan Ramirez, but it hasn't panned out. So they just need to go for that again and have it pan out, because you need the pace up the middle. We have it with Baji and Hairston on the wings, but we don't have enough pace up the middle to
they've got to spend big money on it, is the problem.
Do you think they gave Papa a fair shake, or do you think he was misused?
I think they gave Papa a fair shake because he obviously had some off the field stuff going on, and I don't think he totally got over that once he came here. Just knowing him off the field, he enjoyed partying, but also he had some stuff going on after that off the field incident with reconciling with his family. So rough year for Marco. I think him moving to back to Guatemala was a good move for him personally. I don't think he would have done well here.
Kind of like a Gabby Torres.
Yeah. A little bit of off the field stuff.
Yeah.
Not fitting in.
Yeah. I think a lot of people didn't realize that about Gabby too, is that he had some off the field stuff with another player too that kind of got him in some trouble. They tried shipping the other player out, tried to get him straight. And
also not totally seeing eye to eye with Pablo.
Right.
There was a disconnect there.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's what I'm most afraid of is Pablo's personal feelings about somebody.
That's been my old man's fear when it comes to any player that they bring in is, we've known and seen Pablo on and off the field for the better part of almost 2 decades, it seems. And when it comes to certain relationships and certain players, we know he can butt heads, and this organization will do what they can to give Pablo what he wants, and has shown that. So, that's where some players sometimes and some people sometimes just kind of go.
My biggest worry with Pablo is that bringing in a real number 10, someone that could really turn this team around, is first of all going to be expensive. So I think the front office needs to understand that. You can't try and go cheap on that role. You've got to spend money if you really want that turnaround. And then number 2, I think Pablo has an issue dealing with people that are offensive minded like that, especially in a central midfield role. I think that it's just one of those things where that's not what he played. And those people tend to come with a little bit of an ego as well. Like a true number 10, you kind of want him to have a little bit of an ego. You want him to want to take that shot. You want him to want to have the ball all the time. You want him to kind of be – that's what Jermaine Jones did at the beginning of last season. He had that ego. He had that I want to go for it. I'm trying. And he lost that after his injury. So I think that that the Rapids need to come to grips. They're going to have to spend some big money. And Pablo's going to have to come with grips that it's probably going to be someone that might have a little bit of an ego and is also going to be more offensive-minded than he wants.
So he should just let Connor Casey deal with that.
Well, I think having Connor Casey on staff might be the first step towards having that link between the offense and the defense. I felt like there were times last year that Spenny and Pablo didn't meet eye to eye, and maybe the trust and the camaraderie wasn't there as much as it is with Connor and Pablo, because Brian and I have both seen it out at training that they communicate and they talk for a long time. And it doesn't ever really seem to be heated or anything like that where, it could be taken negatively. From what I've been able to tell at a distance, it seems like there's some camaraderie there, some trust on both sides. And, maybe it does come from that 2010 year. Maybe it comes from the entire time that Connor was here and they played together, and that they understand each other and what, he understands Pablo a little bit more. Spenny wasn't here as long. Different kind of time frame too. So, maybe having Connor here is that first step, and maybe Connor can slowly kind of get into some of that stubbornness of Pablo that no one else has been able to tap into. I'm only hoping. I mean, because...
And chat's calling out, don't give him number 10.
Well, yeah, I was going to get to that I'm still firmly believe, and I call it the curse of LP Bay. Unless you're better than LP Bay, no one should wear that number, because otherwise you're just cursed to not survive here.
And I don't think it's necessarily that Paulo doesn't want somebody who's offensive minded. He just wants somebody who's equally committed to defense,
right?
Which we hopefully saw in Jermaine Jones before the injury,
and I think
he wants kind of that profile of a guy that'll play like that both
and from
ways.
What they're telling us, Nana's supposed to be it, but we also have to remember he's 22, so he's relatively young. He's still new to Colorado. I mean, he's only been here technically maybe a month now. I mean, granted, he did play in some altitude, but not at 6,000 feet. So, and getting to know a team and their mentality and their tactics and trying to plug him into what was already a pretty stacked together roster that knows how they're playing. So it might take a little bit of time to figure out how to get this guy in there, but I'm hoping that 10 minutes last week was the first of
here's
many.
My biggest worry about that is that when he was making those substitutes, he put Nana in a defensive midfielder role, not the 10 spot, and put Cerna in the 10 spot.
I don't have a problem with that.
And I'd say we've always talked about Cerna in the 10 spot as a sub. But if you're wanting him to start moving into that role, you shouldn't be making those subs like that.
No, I don't think he should be moving into that role. I think he should be moving into Sam Cronin's role.
Yeah, I think Brendan's meaning is more of a two-way player.
Yep.
Nana prefers to play the 6 or the 8. He's no 10. Pablo has said that outright. Burgundy Wave had a full story on that a week ago or something about how Nana prefers to play. He prefers to play from deep, but he likes to get into the attack from deep as well.
And you could see it in just his first 5 minutes of being on the pitch. I felt like the movement from the position he's supposed to play to how he plays is what you want when you have two defensive midfielders. Because the way Michael Azira plays, we called him box-to-box last year. But really, watch him. He's not box-to-box. He's more defensive midfield. He doesn't really get close to the box much up top, the offensive box. He's not really...
more like 18 to 10 yards into the opponent.
Yeah, he might make it at the tip of the half circle on the offensive side, but that's about as far as Azira's going to go. And that's almost about as far as Cronin goes. He goes a little bit further, but that's about it. He doesn't go much further either. So they're both like to like as far as I'm concerned. They're not going to get further up the field than you need, and sometimes you don't need to have those two back there. So when you add Nana to it, that means Azira can do what he naturally does, and Nana can start to add some creative ability and chances that weren't normally there because we have a guy in that position that we haven't had. And he's that connection between your number 10 and your two outside wingers. And we haven't had that because I don't think that Cronin and Azira really finished that connection between the two because there's some distance between that in the field. And I saw it until Nana came in.
It seems like this season that connection isn't there like it was last season. I felt that Cronin, and it seems to be Cronin this year. Last year, it seemed like if there was a weaker one between the two, it was probably Azira. But these first 3 games, Cronin seems to be off. And a couple people brought it up in chat as well. It just seems like he's a step off. And I don't know what happened in the offseason that has caused that, but he doesn't seem to be as dominating as he was last season. And I think that's part of the problem you're seeing in what I'm considering more holes in our defense. Like, we don't look terrible, but you're seeing a little bit more threats from these other teams. And I think that he's kind of causing that.
I think it's because Cronin's been trying to play more forward, and he's kind of been
not what he's naturally.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's where I go back to when guys are really in a situation, they're going to go back to what they naturally do. And so when it's not working for Cronin, going up forward and trying to be that little bit of extra offensive help, he's going to start sucking back and he's going to start being defensive, and then we're going to start losing whatever momentum we had from that defense to the offense, and then we're going to end up passing it back and trying to look for things and trying to regroup and trying to reorganize and reset, and we're just in a loop. And
I just realized what's really going under the radar, both offensively and defensively, is the play at right back with Miller, and we saw with Williams last week. Williams can't really recover. He didn't do well in the attack, and he didn't do well defensively. So it's a double-edged sword there at right back.
I think people take Miller for granted. Like, he does make a few mistakes here and there, but especially for a decently young player, he's very solid at that position.
He recovers better than anybody at that position so far. Him and Mark Birch recover better than anyone else. And that's when, when you're playing that position, you really have to have the aerobic capacity to be able to sprint 60, 70 yards to recover, because if something bad happens, whether it's on your side of the field or the other, you're automatically running back, and you got to make sure your position's right. And we saw that with Mikhail. His recovery was not up to par. And then you end up making dumb choices or doing something dumb in your own defensive end of the field just to break the play or stop the play. And you tell yourself it's tactical, but it all comes down to the fact you were out of position when the counterattack happened.
So now we're talking about the defense a little bit more. What do you think about Bobby?
I think Bobby had a pretty good game. I don't think, there was really much that could be said as far as, he wasn't as good as Axel or anything. Were we missing Axel maybe on some set pieces and stuff like that? Yeah, but overall, I don't think, having Bobby in there was a bad thing.
He kind of flew under the radar, but as a defender, that's kind of what you want. You
right.
don't want to see him highlighted by a bad play. So yeah, I think he was.
If you can't really say anything, then he did a pretty good job.
And I don't know if you guys saw the same thing I did, but the few times I was trying to watch Watts a little bit more, because now that Axel isn't back there, I think he's taking more of a leadership role back there, and he did a decent job. He seemed to be a little bit more vocal than what I saw before, which was nice to see from him, because, he's obviously stepped into a role. He's earned his starting spot, and I like to see him starting to take a more leadership role back there.
I think, honestly, both Watts and Burling had a decent game, which is, kind of contradicting the scoreline a little bit, because when you say 2-2. Defense messed up somewhere, but
yeah, one's a bullshit PK.
Yeah, the PK was. We kind of went over that a little bit, but
one bad thing about Watts in that game, I saw the replay of that second goal, and if that didn't go in, that could have been a PK because Watts was on the guy's back. That was the one bad play I saw Watts had in that game, but like you guys said, other than that, it was pretty solid.
Yeah, he and when I was watching that play again, I don't know what happened. I think it was Harrison, just stopped running for that guy's cross. There was no pressure on him. So you saw him running, and then all of a sudden the guy got past him, basically, and he stopped running towards it. And I was like, what are you doing? Even if you're not going to get there, if you put that pressure there, that's going to cause him to maybe make a mistake. Maybe that cross isn't as good, perfectly placed to that guy's head. That's kind of disappointed me. It's I could literally see him stop all of a sudden before the cross went off, and that kind of disappointed me.
Nitpicking a little bit, but mistakes happen on the pitch. No one should really give up tracking down a guy if it's your guy, but blame and mistakes aside, everyone knows what they did right or wrong. And if they don't, they got 3 weeks of the coaching staff showing them video of what they did. It's hard to look forward to Kansas City when it's so far away at this point, but these guys,
we don't even know what's going to happen with.
Right.
We got a couple players being called up. So much could happen in 3 weeks.
Well, yeah, and it's really kind of, I don't know. I just would like to see the team trying to, I wouldn't say turn it around, but wake up would be maybe more what I'm looking for. But we've seen it in some of the players in the post game comments. So even though I think that some of the mentality may not be right at certain times, the guys know that this wasn't okay. And on a positive note, Baji guaranteed 3 points at home next time they play at home. So we got to hold them to it. Yep.
And Azero was pretty fired up post game.
Really?
Like to see that. He was pretty PO'd about giving up those 2 goals. He said, "You can win when you score 2 goals," which with this team is pretty accurate.
Right. But when you let in 2 goals.
Yeah, he wasn't happy about that.
See,
I don't imagine any of the players were, but
right.
It's nice to see that Azero was fired up about it.
Good. Yeah, and it's nice to have that kind of reported because, and that kind of shows the mentality of it. Okay, we should win with 2 goals, but we shouldn't be able to let 2 in. And that's more what I'm talking about. Okay, you know what your abilities are, but don't rely on them. Not during the heat of the moment. You can say the cliche stuff afterwards if it gets you through, but to rely on it in the moment just isn't healthy. It doesn't lead to promising things. As much as, we sit there and say, oh yeah, defense wins this and defense wins that. Defense helps, and it's just as much, but you still can't win without scoring.
That's another thing I liked about our small sampling of Boateng is as soon as he got out there, you saw him shouting at guys, pointing at guys. So you see that he has that bit of leadership in him, which I like to see, even though it was 10 minutes that we saw him. But
right. That's
what the team needed at that point.
Yeah, it was just too little too late. And if anything, I was mad at Pobbs because I was calling for that sub at halftime. I felt like that sub.
I don't think he made his
first
sub until the 70th minute, I think.
Yeah, it was actually a little after that. I know that Sora
had 22 minutes, I think.
So that would have put it right around the 78th minute. No, 72nd minute ish.
Yeah, somewhere.
So, but either way, 70th minute sounds about right because at that point Minnesota had made a couple substitutions. So at that point, that's when I start looking at the sideline and looking at the communication between the assistants and Pablo, and then who's running and who's working out, and they got that little radio.
the mentality of waiting that long when you should be winning this game, and handedly, in my opinion, we should have been winning this game. We are obviously a better team than they are, and I will defend the fact that when you want to be a defensive team, that's okay. I'm okay with being a defensive team, but when you're at home, push it even harder being on the offense, especially when it's a team that you should just be dominating. Like, I feel that when we sit back at home and you've discussed it before, where we sit back at home and we go, oh well, a win's a win, 1-0 is okay. Like, that mentality you should have on the road. That's not a mentality you should have at home. At home, you should be wanting to just crush people. Even if you're a defensive team, you should be wanting to take advantage of the fact that you're playing at home. And I just don't feel like we did that this last game.
Well, we talk a lot about this team needs an identity, or what is this team's identity? And the way I look at it right now is this team plays to the level of every team we play. We need our own level. We need to set the bar. Doesn't matter how bad or good this team is, this is how we're going to play. They say that, but every game we say we're playing down to the team's level, whether it's a Minnesota or a New York. I mean, we played two teams on two different ends of the spectrum, and we saw the same Rapids. Why? Because we played down to their level. That's not the mentality we should have, or not mentality, but that's not the identity, ideally, that you want to have, is a team that plays down to their level. We should be a team to say, okay, we're going to play the Red Bulls, and yeah, we're going to play them tough, and we're going to play them gritty. It's going to be like a San Jose game. But then we go and we play a team like Minnesota, and we look at their defensive record. Then, when we were thinking 2-1, 2-0, that's realistic for this team, taking apart a team with a bad defensive record. That would be okay, but a 2-2 tie and the way that it went down, yeah, that's some of us took that as a loss.
Like Orlando last year.
I'm fine with a team that wins 1-0. It's just how it looks on the field.
Yep.
If you win 1-0 and you're dominating the other team, that's fine with me. But if you win 1-0 and you're like scratching for that win the entire time, then that's not a good win.
That's right, and that's an important distinction, because that's what took us into the playoffs last year, still with no confidence for me that they could actually go all the way through.
Yeah, that's one thing about last year. Once the Rapids had that first goal and they're winning 1-0, you saw teams start to get frustrated because they're like, oh, they're not going to concede.
Teams don't feel that way this year. They're not playing us the same way.
They shouldn't.
It's and we're not being taken seriously, which is something that we tried to use as motivation for the last year, but until we start going out there and taking care of business when we need to take care of business, we'll never be taken seriously. Doesn't matter our location. It doesn't matter how much money this club spends on DPs or anything like that. Until this team takes care of teams when they need to take care of teams, they're not going to be taken seriously.
So let's cut all the altitude
bullshit. Let's step back and see that we're 3 games into the season. I've seen a couple posts on Facebook, Twitter, and there's a lot of people that have already basically jumped over the ledge. Doom, gloom.
Oh, that's
season's over.
That's to be expected.
But it's bullshit. I'm sorry. If you're already on, even if you're like literally about to tiptoe over that ledge, you're 3 games into the season. Calm the fuck down.
And offensively, it was their best game of the season.
Right.
Ignoring the fact that it was a 2-2 draw. Offensively, they created their most shots. They doubled their shots on the season in one game.
Right.
And they scored 2 goals, which for this team is what we should want without them conceding 2 goals, obviously.
Yeah, so...
Well, and I think they don't get that PK. This is a different game. I think that's a big turning point to give them basically what was a free goal. Even with Howard in the goal, you're looking at a 50-50 shot that goes in.
But that's why you should never rest on your laurels or your abilities or anything like that, because you just
agreed. Never
know what a ref will decide, or you just never know what might inspire in those closing minutes. And as confident as you may be, or as good as this team may be or had been, those days are past, and they're trying to figure out a new philosophy. And I think some things need to be reevaluated between now and April 9th.
Tim Howard is Tim Howard, but I didn't like what I saw from Tim Howard in that game. The one dribble outside of the goal, I was thinking, that's something I do in indoor rec league. Like, you're Tim Howard, and that kind of goes to show how much respect they had for this Minnesota team, which they should have had more, I feel.
Yeah, I feel like, and that's kind of, what happens when a team like Minnesota had the first two games that they had is it's easy for us to kind of be like, nah.
Damn, but we didn't. I mean, everything Pablo said the last week was preparing us for a draw. I just don't think he believed it. But he said they were coming back. They were fighting for pride. They were going to put up a hell of a fight. He was preparing us for this.
Well, it's one thing for Pablo to say that. It's another thing for the players to believe that and play like that on the field, which they didn't.
No, he was preparing us fans in his interviews for that draw. But he didn't believe it because of his frustration. And I hope that means the players didn't believe it either.
I almost feel like there should... ideally, you don't want your coach or anyone to prepare your fans for a draw, even when it's away. But that's kind of it for me. It's full circle about how I feel like some of the mentality needs to be thrown out the window if we really want to start being taken seriously, and if we want to start winning games. Tell me certain things after it, but don't have that mentality going into it.
We need to have the mentality that we want to score goals, and it just doesn't seem like that's the mentality at all.
It's Pablo hypnotism, mentality, mindset, belief.
Might have to title this
turn
episode.
Turn a game on its was it turn a game on its head? That's one of his favorite things to say.
Our heads were spinning. That's for sure. But I don't know. Any final thoughts?
How's everyone going to pass the next few weeks?
Right.
Well, you should pick up a copy of Mile High Sports Magazine before it's too late. The March issue is all Rapids. We have a few features on Tim Howard, Gashi, and Schuberg.
So for all the people who are negative and say that the media doesn't give the Rapids any love.
Yeah, it's an all Rapids magazine. So pick that up. Wahoo's Fish Tacos has them. World of Beer. Or you can pick them up on milehighsports.com.
Are you going to sign one for us?
If you want. If you can find me, I'll sign one for you guys.
It might be a couple weeks between now and then, right?
Well, there's 3 weeks just for me to sign magazines.
We'll get you out the tailgate.
And Rapids Media Game, April 14th.
Yeah, I'm super stoked.
Gonna 2-foot some people.
Don't do it to me, though. I need to be able to play in my Sunday league.
C38's got the RSL trip up, finally.
Oh, good. So the ticket available, yeah. All right.
So now it's $99 for a bus, hotel, and ticket. So you ride the bus out. They drop you off at the hotel. It takes you over to the stadium. We tailgate, go into the stadium, and then bus drives you back and then drives you home the next day. So it's a steal.
Yeah,
$99 for an entire trip out to any stadium is dirt cheap.
Well, that's pretty much buy your ticket, share a hotel fee, and the bus ride is free. When you consider $100 for all three of that, and it's an 8, 9, 10 hour bus ride. It's a lot of drunk people. All right, well, I don't know how I'm going to spend the rest of the week, except for there's a lot of international games I'll be paying attention to. Some of them matter, some of them don't. But
hopefully Howard doesn't get injured in any of them.
Yeah, definitely knock on some wood, cross some fingers, do whatever voodoo you do.
So well. That was a cough. You missed a cough.
That was a, yeah. That stream was like coffee. What?
Who else did we get called up outside of Howard? It was
Williams
got called up. And someone else.
Williams.
Trinidad Tobago, yep.
Despite his performance that we just graded as maybe a D or an F.
Maybe that'll help him. We can only hope.
It's one game.
Well, it's, not like TNT is, Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia.
Maybe he'll learn some things from those number 10s they have down there.
Not quite the right
Maybe
position.
he'll bring back one with us.
Or at least an idea who we need to look at. I don't know. There's some, I don't know, if you think, like you had mentioned earlier, South American teams.
And apparently the Argentina League has been having financial issues. So some of the players down there are looking to jump ship. From what I've read on the internets.
And they got about a month left to figure it out before that transfer window shuts the door. It's May 2nd, I think, 12th, somewhere around there. There's a 2 in it.
I feel like Padraig has something up his sleeve. He always has something up his sleeve.
Yeah, I was going to say it wouldn't be Padraig if he didn't have something up his sleeve.
Oh, Brendan, you're going to have to get up on the Rapids discussion page because there was some people trying to throw the Smith under the bus.
Oh, I saw that. I just refrained from commenting because...
Me too. I was like, oh...
It's the same people that are ready to jump the ship 3 games into the season or start pulling blame or, because FSL fired
Sadly,
their coach.
One of them's our editor.
I think that people don't necessarily realize, yes, Padraig is supposed to be the one responsible for bringing in the players, but, he looks at what they've done, what they can do. There's a lot of analytics involved, but once they get here, it's not his problem anymore. If they're not being utilized right, it's not Padraig's problem. And, maybe that was some of the issue with Bravo. And, we can speculate all we want and we'll probably never get the full answers, but I feel like Padraig is doing his job, and I feel like he's done a pretty darn good job when you consider what he's had to work with and what he's come into and everything like that. And if he's got something up his sleeve, we've learned, at least in the last year and a half, don't always question it because, Jermaine Jones came in, Tim Howard came in, Gashi came in, even Doyle. All of these moves are things that wouldn't have happened without Padraig. So there really hasn't been a whole lot of bust. It's not like Padraig brought in Gabby. He did bring in Marco, but as you explained, there were some things that Papa had that, it was his problem, not so much Pablo or Padraig. So, I'm not one of the ones that would even have anything to say.
I'm just hoping his focus is on a number
Padraig.
10. That's what I want. I want his focus to be on a number 10.
I still feel like if we're going to get a DP, it's not going to be till the Juan Ramirez thing clears up. So until that whole scenario happens, we're going to have
Major League Soccer and their transparency with their financials.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on with the Ramirez thing. I've stopped trying.
Yeah,
I've come up with all kinds of scenarios. We're just going to have to wait and see when it happens.
And that's how I feel. I feel like we're just going to have to, unfortunately, this club's in a little bit between a rock and a hard place with the whole Ramirez thing. And until that gets cleared up, we're hindered a little bit. But if this club can just tap into some of the things that were working last year and figure out how to make the connection between the defensive midfield and the offensive midfield work, we'll be okay. We got a few weeks to work on it. Despite the fact the guys have a few days off this week, we still have plenty of time for them to work on it. And yeah, as Marco said, we've got some really good luck when it comes to going into Kansas City with Pablo. So there's that to look forward to. And on that note, I think we will close it out and see you guys next week.
Maybe.
Cheers.
Cheers.